5th edition is more like Supers than it is like the D&D that has come before it. This isn't a diatribe, it's an essay, one in which I will provide examples and arguments towards this thesis. I'm not here to say that anyone is having bad, wrong fun, and I'm not here to negate the efforts that lots of DMs are making to play 5e with the same idiom and rhythm of play as prior editions. The reason that I think this is a point worth making is because I think it's worth understanding how a system nudges play in a given direction, and it's worth understanding what direction it is that you're being led. It can be perfectly fun and good to go in that direction. It can also be good to understand how the current is flowing towards some things, and pulling you away from others. So before we get into it deeper, some introductions. I'm the Complex Games apologist, sometimes known as Antoine Lavoisier, or the French chemist, and in ordinary life, my name is Jay. A big thank you to everyone that has subscribed and signal boosted all the videos on the channel at some point, and I'll have to give more time to properly start up a Patreon page sometime. Suffice it to say, I wouldn't be here now having brought up the content to this level of awesome if it hadn't been for the help of such staunch early adopters. Cheers, everyone. So, what was I trying to say again? Oh right, let's refine this thesis a little bit. In terms of genre and idiom of play, in other words, what actually preoccupies your sessions and preoccupies the minds of players as they make decisions in actual play. 5e's system of rules, especially the power sets of the various classes and the pace at which those classes level up. That system of rules is pushing play to be more like Supers than akin to the way folks used to play. Specifically, there are a number of iconic patterns of play and experiences that, when you use the system of other D&D games, tended to occur. In time, I'll get to what those are and how, at least in my view, Supers is an opposite direction from that. One more time with feeling for anyone who feels attacked here. I don't think it's a bad direction. It can be great fun to play. But for my part, I miss having some of those experiences. At this point, I have to stop and operationalize a great many of these ideas. What do I mean by Supers? What do I mean by the way we used to play? When I say Supers, I don't mean guys with capes. More like cloaks, actually. What I do mean is that the character's abilities, what they get from their character sheet, are more important than what they get from the world. A classic experience I recall from older editions that I don't hear much about anymore was that the character needed information. They needed to forge alliances and get gear sometimes to get the edge up in situations. We didn't just rely on the abilities we already had, trusting that our powers would carry us through the day. And as a dungeon master, I know that I would construct a lot of environments and do a lot of my preparation and world building, working from a belief that the players would believe that they needed to be cautious, needed to ask questions and get to know the environment, and that I might be able to induce the players to go someplace on the promise of valuable treasures. And going full bore into situations might cost the characters dearly. That's something that players and dungeon masters knew. So I would prepare potential allies. I would set the stage for powerful treasure to be sought, and for maps and guides, and the warning that came with them to be valuable. And I trusted that the system would have my back on that, and that the way the game would play would provide some reciprocity to some of those choices that were made. And instead, what I see from the results of the table, from the culture of play in the wider world, and in my own experience playing 5th edition, is that the rewards and consequences for earning powerful gear, for forging worthy alliances, they don't come through in the vanilla system as it's presented in the core rulebook. And that gets into your skull as the dungeon master, and that definitely seeps into your thinking as a player and as a person role-playing the point of view of your character. Pretty soon you figure out that the most important decisive factor of how well you survive encounters and environments is how well you make use of what's already on your character sheet. In other words, your superpowers. They matter more than the world and the items and gear in it. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, of course. Super-style stories can dwell instead on the choices that the heroes make about how they win, rather than if they win. Rather than worrying about if you need those spell slots for later, you can use them all to make a big spectacle or save more lives. You can give away your magic sword to the temple or to an inspiring would-be hero NPC rather than hoard it for yourself. That can be cool too. I just find that the natural gravity of the system is pulling me in a different direction and I miss some of the old things. In a little bit, we're going to go deeper and look in the book, actually do some quantitative analysis, and try to prove my point in a couple ways. But already I know there are some folks out there that are going to comment and say how if I like those things, if I value those experiences, there are levers, A, B, or C, that I can pull in the Dungeon Master's Guide, or that if encounters are too easy and don't feel perilous enough to cause characters and players to actively watch their step, then it's on me that I'm screwing up as a Dungeon Master by not doing the right things to force the game to suit my taste. Some folks will probably say that you can just dial up every encounter to overwhelming. Others will say that I need to slow leveling down from the pace set by the PHB XP tables, and a little later on I will acknowledge that Adventures in Middle-earth, the rules module from Cubicle 7, actually solves a lot of these issues that I'm going to bring up. But right now, what I want to say to the naysayers in the audience, none of those things are in the base game. None of those are the natural tendency of the dice, the ration of the abilities and spell slots, the way that short and long rests work, according to the player's handbook. And the PHB sets expectations. Players come to your game table expecting to play similar to the way that the game plays in the PHB. You need to make a diplomacy check with your players to do things differently. If you use milestone leveling instead of the encounter tables, players will be expecting that the milestone leveling will come as fast, or probably faster, than the vanilla XP table would default to. Very few people are excited to play with dungeon masters that tell them to make anything they want in the book, yet in the very first session, send the party of 2 sorcerers, a monk, and a wizard to investigate a dungeon filled with an anti-magic field. So even if you did away with XP years ago, as I hear from so many people that they have, the pace of non-XP leveling that your people are anticipating, what they're looking for in milestones, is going to be something similar to what the books are giving them. So now let's go deep. Let's go by the numbers. Let's make the case for my point. Page 84 of the Dungeon Master's Guide says the following.
Assuming typical adventuring conditions and average luck, most adventuring parties can handle 6 to 8 medium or hard encounters in a day.
This is congruent with my experience of the game, that the PCs can breeze through 4 encounters with ease, and that up until that point they're not really worried about if they're running out of hit dice, spell slots, or daily abilities. From a player's perspective, and often from an in-character perspective, I can get a feel for how many encounters we're probably going to face. And up until that 5th encounter in a day, unless we are having a chronically knockdown, drag-out fight over and over again, I'm not really worried about if we're going to make it. From a Dungeon Master's perspective and from a World Builder's perspective, there's a limit of believability to how many encounters you can pack into an adventuring day. How many roadblocks you can put up in the path of those long rests that fully replenish hit points and spell slots. I mean, how easy is it to believe that in a single day of overland travel, your group would get into between 6 and 8 encounters? How does a Game Master pack that many vicious predators into an overland journey? And in a dungeon, the questions of believability are different, but they're still there. Why can't we take a long rest after these 3 encounters? Why is there a dungeon so full of ravenous beasts? Is every quest in the dungeon a race against time? For my part, the answer is no. Most overland journeys don't have 6 to 8 encounters in a day. Most days of urban adventuring don't have 6 to 8 groups of thugs waiting in the alleyways. And most dungeons aren't a race to get the antidote for the poisoned princess right now. This was less of an issue in prior editions where the horizon of the adventuring day was much closer. When there were 4 encounters in an adventuring day, the way the system was designed, it was somewhat easier to feel like you were in trouble after the first or even the second encounter. One solution to a lot of these issues is to splice the opportunities for loot and the moments for rest into the spaces between short rests rather than long rests. From a world building perspective, this is sort of difficult because this means that you need to pack your worlds incredibly tightly to make a few hours journey between the sage and the dungeon. Cubicle 7 Entertainment in Adventures in Middle-earth has basically swapped the positions of short and long rests somewhat, And now a short rest is what you can do when you make camp, but you can only take a long rest when you reach the houses of Elrond, when you drink mead with Treebeard in the Fangord Forest, when you sup at the highest level of Minas Tirith. And that makes some good sense to a fantasy world where getting mugged 3 times in a day or having goblins jump out at you 8 times in a day on an overland journey might not. So what I'm coming around to is that on those adventuring days where you don't feel the pinch, where you aren't squeezed by the 5th or 6th encounter, those encounters that the game designers designed the game to accommodate and then they labeled them as hard encounters, on those kinds of days that will be shorter, then as a player and as an in-character role player, your superhero cape is on. You don't feel peril, which also means you don't need a +1 sword or a wand of magic missile. You don't need to be interested in that cache of healing potions. You don't need the protection of the Rangers of the Westwood. Your superpowers, the stuff on your character sheet, has got your back instead. And that's where the genre shifts for me. I don't know much about Metropolis City or Gotham or any of the superheroes' hometowns. I know about the hero, I know about his immediate circle, but Batman is only ever worried about who the mayor of Gotham is, if the mayor happens to be controlled by a villain, or the mayor is the villain, or the mayor is somehow Commissioner Gordon or Bruce Wayne. The mayor is never an ally to be sought, just someone looking to the hero to solve the crisis of the week. Batman never worries about money because his ninja skills and the billionaire ability on his character sheet make the money irrelevant. That's supers to me. Now on to the second point. Also on page 84, a little bit further down, they've done the math for you. On those adventuring days where you do feel the pinch, those 6 to 8 medium hard encounter type of days, they tell you that one adventurer will be getting 300 XP, which, page 15 of the PHB, will get you to level 2. Level 2 adventurer will be getting 600 XP, which is also enough to get to level 3. Level 3 adventurer will get 1200. And the first day takes them to 2100, and 2/3 of the second day will get them to level 4. The pattern continues with approximately 2 days for each level of adventuring, all the way up to level 11. 20 days from level 1 to level 11. Going from level 1 to 2 can double your hit points. 3 to 5, you can go from levitate and misty step to full-on flying. The obstacles before a character are swiftly mooted by the growth in their abilities, and this is another place where the genre begins to feel like supers to me. The character and the player don't need to, and are deprived of the chance to quite literally learn the ropes, discovering the dangerous, clever, and safe ways of using their abilities before those abilities get overshadowed by brand new ones. Playing by the book, you only get 4 days of adventuring to find clever ways of using levitate before you can now fly. That feels supers-ish, because the balanced rewards and treasures that you find on one adventuring day become trivial or even worthless as you level past their relevance. What if I give you a scroll of rock to mud, but before you find occasion to use it, you're now in the realm of the dungeons that are made of walls of force? The answer, to my mind, is that the scroll is mooted compared to the awesome power that you're getting on your character's sheet. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a certain unique kind of genre feeling to that wow effect as the character is always becoming more powerful than their previous environment. It's kind of a cool genre to experience, but for me, it feels more like a supers genre than the kind of exploration-focused, abide-in-the-world fantasy that I think of from my formative experiences with D&D. I don't want to heap all the blame on 5th edition here. Part of it is that the times have changed, and it's harder to get the people together on the same night and time nowadays, so the half-life of what a campaign has become is perhaps a little bit shorter, and people want to do some leveling up in whatever they can manage before things fly apart. Another aspect of this is that 5e isn't really that much faster than what 3.5 gave you out of the book, which was 28 days of 4 encounters per day adventuring to get to level 11, and 20 days isn't that different. Another thing to consider is that there were those years where murder hobo culture peaked, where kill it for the XP and the loot was a plague upon some parts of the hobby. It was very difficult to motivate players with anything because they just killed everything in sight. And getting tons of power on your character sheet quickly certainly helps to push that murder hobo spirit a little bit to the side. But the D&D of the present is different. It's less ambiance and more story nowadays. And that's in many respects a matter of how little time there is for a story to develop on its own, just in terms of what happens is the story. If you blink, you'll miss those treasured few days of being level 2 or 5 or 7. Wherever you feel the game is at its best, those moments now beg to be made momentous, not just procedural, because they're now fleeting moments. Anyway, I miss when finding a wand of magic missile was almost a milestone unto itself, where the kindly level 3 ranger in the forest was a valuable ally to keep tabs on. There are other tabletop role-playing games out there where the wand and the ranger are still important. I recommend giving them a try sometime.